This week we're talking about a group sundered in half. The people that rose up against their own oppression and conquered their enemy, only to fall to infighting and eventually to take their place as a great people. This week we are talking about the history of the Gith. I'm your GM Isaiah, and welcome to Game Master's Arsenal. Roll initiative. So So this week we are doing something a little bit different. Normally we cover the monsters, but and their stat blocks and everything with them. But for the more complicated groups, such as the Gith, you need a little bit more detail on them because these are people, not monsters. So they they have their own society and everything. And unlike like the Yanti, um, these people have history that matters to their culture and people. So we are going to be breaking it down. This week is going to the Gith are going to be over the course of a couple weeks. We are starting with their history here. Now, the history of the Gith before the Illithids is unknown. It was erased by the Illithids, who took them as a slave race, just like they had done with the Duragar, and shaped them through their experiments and the centuries of bondage to their mind control. And so it's one of those things when you're talking about the Gith, they use the term forerunners for those that came before the Illithids, and nobody knows exactly any history or any information about them. So as a world builder, you're free to kind of go off of that. But all we know is that their history abruptly ended when they were taken by the Illithids. The forerunners stopped being then, and then afterward they would be called Gith. Over time, as the Illithid Empire spread and the Gith were used as a labor force, controlled by their mind and subject to the whims of their Illithid masters, they began to learn to resist it and hone their own psionic abilities. Now, the psionic abilities play a huge part into Gith society nowadays, but at the time, they used this to eventually break free of the Illithid. And over the course of a year, their revolution was raged against the Mind Flayer Empire and forced the remaining Mind Flayers and Elder Brains to scatter through the material plane out of the astral realm, afraid of what the Gith would do to them. They fled, and of course, after this war, Gith was unsatisfied with the liberation of her people. That wasn't enough. She saw all the mind flayers that had escaped and all the other people around the universe, and said, okay, so we will hunt every Illithid down and execute them for what they did. And to do this, they wanted to establish a new empire on the astral plane to conquer the world. Well, the multiverse, and because this is the astral plane we're talking about. So the seas of Spelljammer. They wanted, or when you're incorporating that into the world, anyway, like another realm or the Great Seas. Even. After this war, being unsatisfied, they formed this empire. But there was another, Zerthamon, who saw this flaw in Gith's idea. See, what Zerthamon saw was that in establishing their own empire, they would become no better than their Mind Flayer masters, falling to tyranny and corruption, eventually becoming nothing more than enslavers as they were before. Zerthon would lead a long and bloody civil war. The Githrazai, the Githrazai, which means those who spurn Gith in Gith language, fought with the Githyanki, who mean the children of Gith. So these factions formed, and they fought this long civil war, which allowed the surviving Mind Flayers to hide themselves in the Underdark and in other realms, eventually to kind of escape their sight. In the end of this civil war, because again, this is a people where the history is not there. In the end, the Githrazai retreated into Limbo, and the Githyanki had to retreat to regroup in the astral realm. The Githyanki took over the old Mind Flayer settlements because they wanted to still regroup and resume their conquest. Because of this, the people were sundered. The Gith stopped being Gith. They started being Gith Razai and Gith Yankee, these two groups fighting with each other forever. There was a group that tried to bring them together, but it didn't work. And when you're incorporating this into your world, if you want to use that, like maybe they're still there trying to get them to work together, but they formed two different societies, which makes Gith very interesting. The Gith Razai, both sides were very much shaped by their surroundings, less about their history, more about the surroundings. The Githrazai in Limbo. Now, when you talk about Limbo, it is a world of primal chaos. Everything's spinning around. Existence is shaped by the strongest will. Well, not necessarily the strongest, but the concentration of will. And so they use their psionic abilities to shape Limbo into what they wanted. Crystalline strongholds, fortresses, settlements, everything. They literally use their mental abilities to and will to shape this world. And over time they built a great kingdom. And eventually, like through this time, they also embraced their own philosophy. It placed psionic power, thought, order, and discipline above everything. And now they rarely leave Limbo. And when they do leave Limbo, it's because they have not forgotten their old masters. And they send out Rakmas, or Illithid hunting parties, who pursue the Illithids to kill them. So if you need to, like, just want some if Razai out there, they're going to be hunting Illithids. They're not going to be doing anything else. They're not a warmongering people. They just want revenge. They're just out for revenge still. Which I get. You know, if you never want the Mind Flayers to rise, you have people hunting them down. From a world building standpoint, it makes sense. The Githrazai are out hunting them down. The Githyanki, though, took over the Illithid Empire. Their old settlements and everything. They weren't big enough to just form this massive empire overnight. But they organized themselves into a strict, militaristic caste society to pursue their enemies and conquer the realms. Gith eventually perished. Gith eventually perished. I think Zeramon. I think I'm never gonna get this right on the first go. I think Zerthimon also perished at some point, but it stopped being for them. It stopped being a ruler because there was not a caste society. Zerthimon for the Githrazai um, saw the teachings of Zerthimon and kind of became like a sage to them. So following her principles. So that happened. And then Githyanki were very much structured, ordered caste society. And when Gith perished, powerful undead advisor took the throne. The Lich Queen Valkith molded the society to her will and became a god for them to worship. She wanted no one else. She consumed the souls of the Githyanki to fuel her lichdom. So at this point in time, they are ruled by a lich. And however you want to like play that out. Now the Githyanki raid settlements nowadays. They come from their ships in the astral realm, either into the physical realm or just along the seas of the astral realm, the pockets, and they raid settlements and kingdoms, waging war, conquering. They plunder and take the riches, leaving the survivors kind of broken. They leave them enough to kind of start rebuilding so that eventually they can come back and raid them again. The other thing is they hunt. The other thing they set out to do is to hunt the Mind Flayers. Now, this is a very interesting belief and like I don't know how to describe it. This is a very like thematic piece with the Gith is they are hunting the Mind Flayers. That is their purpose right now. They want to see their old masters destroyed. Um, so the Githyanki will send out their people to hunt them, and even I believe it's according to Githyanki like society and the Forgotten Realms, it is a rite of passage to kill a Mind Flayer. So, and this is where we get to the thing about adapting history, because histories are meant to work with your world. You don't mold your world around the history of this people. You mold this history around your world. It's supposed to serve the story. So maybe this history doesn't even come up. Maybe you've got groups of Githyanki hunting down Mind Flayers, and the reasons why aren't as important as they are doing it. So keep that in mind when you're building this, as well as like culture. Like you got to keep the beats of it. The beats of the story are okay. The Githraze are a monastic tradition. Uh, they have the beats of their culture is their monastic tradition. They hate the mind flayers. They're solitary. They don't leave limbo. So seeing them is going to be very rare. Perfect. Perfect. That is all you need. Because beyond that, there's not much you need. The rest of it is how is meant to be shaped by your world. Um, maybe maybe Gith and Zerthamon in your world didn't didn't have a philosophical difference. Maybe their falling out was on a more personal level. And because of that, like the history has been shaped by that, and like this maybe comes out. Maybe the Gith secretly both sides really do want unity. But at this point in their histories, they cannot have it. And of course, what about the half Giths? What if a Githyanki was raised in the society of a Githrazai? How much of their militaristic culture and xenophobic culture is a result of their upbringing versus whether or not the species has shifted into that as a people? So these questions and the societies you build, you need to kind of consider those, but don't let this history and the culture itself really just slam you and say, okay, we're not gonna be we're not gonna be doing this. Um, so the history is shaped by your world, but this matters. They hate each other. They hate each other. Um, so just remember that both sides really hate each other. Um, and the Gith as a whole are a fascinating group. The reason why we didn't go too in depth with the culture, well, other than we're other than we don't want to keep you guys here forever, is because the culture is defined by you, as the storyteller. Militaristic caste society. That's what you need to know. What the castes are, that's more malleable. Monastic, xenophobic, solitary empire. Okay, you can play with that. The rest of it's up to you. You shape people to your story as well. So remember that. The history. This is I gave a general history because that's all you need. Maybe this is all you need to you utilize within your world. If you want to expand on it, you can expand on it. You can do your own. You can do your research and find more on it. But this is a general idea of it. Now, next week we are actually going to be covering the story elements that you can implement into your world. Hooks, plot lines, various NPCs that you could run with Githrazai and Githyanki. And then after that, the next week we will be covering them in combat, stat blocks, group formations, general strategy, battle intelligence, things like that. Things you need to make these guys an effective and dangerous enemy for your players if you come into contact. That's everything that we have for you tonight. I would appreciate it if liked, subscribed, followed the channel, whatever you're doing and wherever you're listening to this, because we're on a few different platforms. Do what you need to, just keep in touch with us. Of course, leave a comment, tell us how you've used the Gith and what you think of their history. It's everything we've done. I think that's where we're going to leave it tonight.